Since the turn of the new millennia, UFO morphology has taken on some different appearances, and some would argue that UFOs are taking on different appearances because science fiction UFOs are taking on different appearances. For example, this UFO. And so reason would suggest that triangular UFOs like this one, and UFOs that bear any resemblance to a science fiction UFO, exist only because people want them to exist, or because talented CGI artists or talented drone builders have managed to construct UFOs that resemble these famous UFOs out of famous science fiction shows created by Chris Carter. But what many do not realize is that the triangular UFO morphology, at least, comes from a source before the time of the X-Files. As a matter of fact, the whole reason that Chris Carter used this particular UFO morphology is because of an outbreak of sightings and photographs, and also a series of military investigations into a UFO outbreak that took place in Belgium between 1989 and 1991. And ever since this historic outbreak, a series of triangular-shaped UFOs have been spotted all over the world, from New York to Brazil to Germany and everywhere in between. And there have been many rumors to go along with these mysterious craft, ranging from extraterrestrial scouts to experimental stealth aircraft built by the U.S. Air Force. But what is the real truth here? Is this just the product of clever CGI and cleverly built drones, or is there something far more significant behind these sightings and the many, many photographs and extensive footage to go along with them? Well, that's what we're going to look at in depth today on today's Angry Alien Bulletin right now. The Belgian UFO outbreak began on November 29, 1989 in the Eupen area in Belgium, and 2 police officers were the first people to make a report. Far more credible witnesses than one would usually find in your typical UFO outbreak. Police officers, gendarmes Nicole and Von Montague, and I'm probably mispronouncing that, spotted a large triangular platform silently hovering above a field at the side of Road N68 between the towns of Kettenis and Merels at the Gross Weide, and I think I'm pronouncing that right, but again, I'm not sure. This again was at 5:20 p.m. after the sun had gone down. Quote, "While approaching the crossing of the street, our attention was drawn towards an unusual display. We saw a field close to the road which was entirely lightened. It was like the lights on a huge football field. We found that abnormal, and we wanted to know what was causing these lightings. Approaching, there was a huge triangular platform with powerful headlights on its underside, and in the middle, there was this orange flashing light. It floated very close to us. It was very dazzling." The 2 gendarmes reported the craft to the dispatcher at the Eupen police station. The dispatcher's name, by the way, was Gendarme Kreutz, who answered to them, quote, "They reported to me an odd silent object. We joked around saying that it must be Santa on the point to land." Gendarme Kreutz logged the call, but remained skeptical, of course. The 2 officers then followed the triangular platform by car when it started to move. They took some advance on it, waited for it, and the triangle came at them and then made a half turn and went away in the opposite direction towards Eupen. The 2 officers requested from Officer Kreutz that he check whether or not there are military operations taking place. They then followed the object as it crossed the countryside towards Eupen. They could see the object well because of its lights and the flashing orange ball in the middle. Nicole states that they drove very slowly and had the feeling that there was somebody in the object, somebody who would be trying to observe what occurs on the ground. One moment later, Kreutz saw a light pass in front of his window at the Eupen police station, and he stated, quote, "In the distance, I could see something bright, but I didn't know what it was. However, suddenly, I could see something like a laser beam shoot out the light and then go back into the light. Nicole's testimony continues as follows, quote, "We continued to observe the object as it circled above the city of Eupen. It appeared to be heading towards the forest. On each side of the object there was a kind of laser beam and a ball that was leaving the object and coming back, as if the ball was trying to measure something, so it was easy for us to keep track of it in the sky." Gendarme Nicole radioed the Eupen dispatch again at this point and learned that in the meanwhile, Kreutz had contacted 4 local airports and all had said that there was no unusual activity in the sky. The gendarmes observed the motionless object in the distance for 30 minutes. And then something else occurred. Again, Nicole continues, quote, "All of a sudden, it came out of nowhere. Another spacecraft. We were a little frightened. The one that we had followed was still over there, and now a second one was rising up into the sky. And at a given moment, it tilted slightly. We could see again the shape of a triangle with bright headlights, and it was exactly like the first object. We could see some kind of dome at the top with 2 or 3 small windows, and there was a light inside the object. By the time we realized what it was, the object flew away. Moments later, Kreutz, at his opened window, saw a strange machine floating and estimated it to be a distance of about half a kilometer from him. The object was like a boat floating in the sky, according to Kreutz, and it drifted a few seconds in front of him and then flew away in the direction of La Calamine. I think that's how it's pronounced. Again, I'm sorry about that. But the night was far from over. 6 minutes later, 2 other officers encountered a similar object in the small village of La Calamine, perhaps the same object given that the original one was heading in the direction of this village 8 miles north of Eupen. One of these officers, Gendarme Plummins, had this to say, quote, "We had heard the colleagues talk about this flying object. At the beginning, we thought it was some kind of joke, but then we saw something and it wasn't so funny anymore. Both of us had a strange feeling. It was impossible to explain what the object was. We thought it was an American airplane or something. We had no other explanation for what it might be, but it was real and it was above us." Now, the testimony of 5 police officers would make for a pretty substantial sighting on its own, but there were dozens of sightings of these objects in this region on the same night. It would take hours for me to relate all of them to you. I will go ahead and relate only one, and this took place at 6:50 p.m. on the E40 before Herve and Fleuron by Mr. Raymond Strasters and his friend Mr. Bruno Pirlet. Again, probably mispronouncing that, and I apologize. On November 29th, 1989 at 6:50 p.m., Mr. S. and his friend P. drove on the E40 and were a bit before exit 37 of Herve and Fleuron coming from the east. The driver then saw before him 3 powerful lights directed down almost over the highway, and it was very intense, very low, and apparently motionless. So he said to his friend, "Well, it's weird. There's no lighting of a soccer field here." Approaching these lights, they began to better discern a huge triangular-shaped object, which moved slowly at the level of the lighting of a soccer field about 100 meters away. The object was very dark, almost black, and it was detached against the background of the lighter sky. The triangle was moving horizontally with a constant speed, but exceedingly slow. The witnesses slowed down without stopping altogether. Sitting next to the driver, Mr. P had carefully scrutinized it. He even pulled down the window and leaned his head out of the car. The flying object went along the highway on the north side, almost above the roadside. It moved to the east and crossed the witness's path. At one point, they found themselves virtually below the craft. It was enormous, since the width of the base corresponded to the size of a Boeing 727. Its shape was that of an equilateral triangle with rounded corners. 3 large circular headlights, very powerful, were near the corners of the triangle. The witnesses, however, did not see a red light, flashing or not. The beams of white light were directed downward, but slightly forward. Despite its brilliance, the light was not dazzling and did not prevent the witnesses from clearly seeing the dark mass which carried the headlights. They did not not hear any noise exceeding that of their car, even when they were directly underneath the object. At that time, Mr. P noted the presence of many small bright spots on the base of the triangle. The flying object continued its travel in the same way, and the two witnesses lost sight of it when they took the flare-on exit as they were going to that town. Now, all of this would also be an extraordinary collection of sightings, a mass sighting unto itself. But this was only the beginning, because the military became involved shortly thereafter and attempted to intercept triangular UFOs on the nights of the 30th and 31st of March, 1990. And instead of relating this information to you myself, I'm going to go ahead and leave it to the officers who were on duty that night and who actually gave information to the press on the matter over 30 years ago.
Some people saw very strange objects in the air with a very peculiar behavior. They called the police. The police confirmed the observation. They called the radar station of Glon, and Glon confirmed that they saw a blip in the area. And that was also confirmed by another radar station, which is about 100 miles away. Based on that, they asked to send these two aircraft in the air.
What these pilots detected was well outside the normal flying envelope of an airplane. Sometimes they had what we call lock-ons, which gave a parameters varying from speeds between 150 knots till 990 knots. An acceleration which occurred in a few seconds. These speeds would be impossible to tolerate for a human being. That's a first point. A second point is the visual observations always describe a system, a machine, which hangs and hovers above the surface at quite a low altitude, without making any noise. Now, with the current technology, that would be impossible.
A few more details on this particular encounter. I'm going to go ahead and read you some excerpts from the official military report from March 30th and March 31st of 1990. Quote, "Since the beginning of December 1989, strange phenomena were regularly noticed in the Belgian airspace. The Air Force has a certain number of eyewitnesses, whose majority were indicated by the gendarmerie. Radar tracking stations of the Air Force could in no case confirm before March 30th, 31st of 1990 these visual observations, and the presence of the UFO could never be established by the interceptors sent for this purpose. The staff of the Air Force was able to present a certain number of assumptions concerning the origin of these UFOs, the presence or the test of B-2 or F-117A stealth fighters, remotely piloted vehicles, ultralight motorized vehicles, and AWACS in the Belgian airspace at the time of the facts can be excluded." So at 0 hours and 5 minutes on March 31st, two F-16s took off to intercept the reported UFOs. And between 0 hours and 7 minutes and 0 hours 54 minutes, under the control of the CRC, on the whole, 9 attempts of interception of these UFOs were undertaken by the hunters. The planes had brief radar contacts on several occasions with the targets indicated by the CRC. In 3 cases, the pilots succeeded in locking on for a few seconds on the target, which each time brought a change in the behavior of the UFO. The pilots, however, never had visual contact. At 0 hours and 13 minutes, the first lock-on objective was indicated by the CRC. Position was 6 degrees off the nose of the aircraft at 9,000 feet with a course of 250 degrees. The speed of the target changed into a minimum of time from 150 knots to 970 knots. Unbelievable acceleration. The altitude passing from 9,000 to 5,000 feet, then back up to 11,000 feet, and then suddenly going down to ground level. This resulted in a break of the lock-on after a few seconds, with the pilots losing radar contact. GLON CRC informs at the moment of the break lock that the hunters have flown over the position of the target. Both the Semazaka TCC and the GLON's CRC lost contact with the target at approximately 0 hours and 30 minutes. From time to time, a blip appears in the area, but they are too scarce to have a clear track. Meanwhile, the pilots contacted the Civil Air Traffic Radio operator on VHF in order to coordinate their movements with Brussels. The radio operator UHF contact is maintained with the CRC in GLONs. At 0 hours and 30 minutes, a radar contact is established at 5,000 feet with the target moving at 740 knots. They lock onto the target for approximately 6 seconds, and at the time of the break lock, the signal for radar jamming appears on the screen, so some sort of electronic countermeasures being employed at that particular moment. Ground witnesses at 0 hours and 30 minutes see the F-16 passes 3 times. Now, apparently the ground observers were looking at 3 different objects at the time of the attempted F-16 interceptions, and during the 3rd passage, they note the disappearance of the small triangle, while the most shiny dot, in other words, some sort of light located to the west of the large triangle, moves very quickly, gaining altitude. This dot emits intense red signals in a repetitive way during the operation. In total, 9 interception attempts were made, and on 6 occasions, the pilots were able to establish a lock-on with their air interception radar. On all occasions, targets varied speed and altitude very quickly, and break locks occurred after 10 to 60 seconds, with speeds varying between 150 and 1,010 knots. So the Belgian Air Force overall, in conclusion, was unable to identify neither the nature nor the origin of the phenomena. However, it had sufficient elements to exclude the following assumptions. Balloons, impossible due to the highly variable speeds confirmed visually and by radar. ULM, the same as for balloons. RPV, impossible due to hovering characteristics. Then aircraft, including stealth, same as for RPV because there was no noise. Laser projections or mirages, unlikely due to lack of projection surface. There were no clouds. Light spots have been observed from different locations, and light spots moved over a distance of more than 15 nautical miles. The form of enlightened part of spots were observed with spectacles. Laser projections or mirages cannot be detected by radar. And once again, this was according to, at that time, Colonel de Brouwer of the Belgian Air Force. This is not some sort of ufology historical report or anything along those lines. This was the opinion of the military. So the sightings during the Belgium UFO outbreak continued until 1993. It would literally take me hours, if not days, to relate the details of all of these encounters to you. I'll just give you the details of one more very rough overview. On July 26, 1992, between 10:15 p.m. and midnight, there was a sudden rash of no less than 27 UFO sightings, totaling 72 witnesses, once again concerning triangular-shaped objects. And once again, if we had only this one UFO outbreak to deal with, that would be compelling evidence unto itself. But there have been so many outbreaks like this all over the world, to the point to where I really start to doubt the objectivity of skeptics, the people who continue to insist that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I think that they require unattainable evidence in the minds of some of these people, and that just is not objective at all, nor is it good science. When you combine the testimony of witnesses on the ground with witnesses in the air and the radar data and sensor lock data that's also available to anybody who takes the time to look for it when investigating this particular outbreak, it becomes very clear that something unusual, something unexplained, and something beyond the capabilities of any aircraft that existed in the late 1980s were flying over Belgium at that time. Now, there are some who have theorized that there is an aircraft that could explain all of these sightings. Something called the Northrop TR-3A Black Manta, a triangular aircraft that allegedly makes use of some sort of reversed engineered anti-gravity technology and something that is capable of all of the maneuvering, all of the supersonic aerobatics that were observed during this outbreak. But I personally have my doubts about all of that. Assuming technology like this aircraft actually exists, and indeed existed over 35 years ago, I can't imagine that the U.S. Air Force, assuming that they're the ones who built it, and given the Northrop TR-3A designation, I can't imagine that it was anybody else, would risk flying a highly experimental aircraft like this over Belgium. I don't care if they were a NATO nation. I don't care if they were an ally. To fly an aircraft like this over civilian territory, over public land, would be an exercise in utter insanity. A single malfunction, a single botched maneuver could end up with this craft smashing into the ground and all of this amazingly advanced technology possibly falling into the hands of an enemy, or at the very least, the media becoming aware of the existence of this type of technology. And if aircraft like the TR-3A really existed in the late 1980s, I can't imagine why aircraft technology would have backpedaled so significantly up to the present day, with F-35s and F-22s being as archaic as dinosaurs compared to the Northrop TR-3A. Just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't add up. It seems far more likely that if a craft like this truly exists with all of the capabilities that have been observed and confirmed by military equipment, at least in Belgium, that we are dealing with a technology that's far beyond our current capabilities. And even though there may be some drone operators these days that can create something that looks a lot like a Northrop TR-3A, or perhaps clever CGI manipulators who can create something on the screen that looks like a Northrop TR-3A, I really doubt that that aircraft actually exists. And in my personal opinion, the notion that a new type of extraterrestrial craft arrived in the skies of Belgium in 1989 have been appearing periodically ever since seems a much more compelling theory to me. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and also please keep in mind that we only have a week left before my merch store is going to close down, possibly forever. Not sure if this merch is going to be available after the 22nd. Some of it definitely will be discontinued. And as of right now, we still have an Alien Week being the most likely scenario because you folks have been buying a lot more merchandise than the other designs. But nevertheless, coming up in an aggressive second place is the Hohmann orbital equation, folks, the space flight folks. If you guys can catch up to the UFO people, and I don't think that's beyond the realm of possibility, we could have a space flight week as well. And don't forget the space science fans and the Apophis merchandise, which reads, in 2029, kiss your asteroids goodbye. If you're interested in any of this merchandise, you've got about a week left. All the details in the description. If you would like to support this channel in a smaller way, you can join Patreon for as little as $3 a month, and all of this will go towards my upcoming journey to the United States, where I'll be attending the Space Symposium and also trying to get to the National Archives in Washington, D.C. to check out some UFO footage from Project Blue Book and the CIA that for some reason the archives has refused to digitize for years. love to check all of that out in person. If you'd like to support that, once again, all the details in the description. Thanks again for watching, and as always, stay angry about space.